Good evening, everyone. Sorry for a few seconds delay. Still having problems with my laptop, so I've had to get another laptop to get this sorted out. So tonight is session number two, how to support a friend who is feeling suicidal. Last week we looked at some of the signs and symptoms. One of the things that the National Institute of Mental Health said was this: suicide is complicated and complex and tragic, but it is often preventable. So it's one of the things that we can do to kind of help individuals um, um, certainly change their minds. Not easy, but we can help them. And we looked last week at some of the signs and some of the symptoms of individuals who feel kind of suicidal, in terms of some of the things that they say, in terms of getting things in order, making a will, giving people sums of money, as if kind of closing business before they take their own life. One of the things that we did say as well, that it's still a part of our language, commit suicide, but suicide was decriminalised in 1961. Before that time, it was a crime, and when the church and the state interlocked with its views of suicide, it was a tough deal. If you attempted to take your own life and you failed, you were brought to court, and if you took your own life, the family left behind would be taken to court and property would be confiscated and so forth. So now what we say is either somebody has completed suicide, or they've taken their own life, or people have even said they've killed themselves. So that's some of the things that we looked at last week in terms of the signs and symptoms. And today we're looking at this whole thing around how can we support somebody who is feeling suicidal. So we've kind of got an idea. So how then do we support individuals? So one of the things, one of the things is this, and it sounds really harsh, but this is actually true. If you suspect someone, maybe whether they talk and so forth, don't say to them, are you planning to do something stupid? Are you planning to do something daft? As hard as it may seem, to ask the direct question, are you planning to take your own life, is a direct question, and I'll say more about that in a moment. So as I said, don't say you're planning to do things silly or daft or that type of language. Ask, are you planning to take your own life? Now, listen to what I'm going to say, and I'll say the reasons why. And this is something I've had to do for many, many years, working with mainly with students. So are you planning to take your own life? Yes. How do you plan to do it? What have you got in place? Where are you going to do it? What day are you going to do it? And you might think, Delroy, that's kind of harsh, isn't it? Well, no, but what it does, and researchers found this out, that if you speak to people directly, what it does, they may have had thoughts in their minds for ages, but you've created the space for them to unburden themselves, because they might have carried this for a really long time. And by you saying that, in what it does, it kind of gives them permission to speak. And I know over the years when I've done counselling training and listening skills training, Delroy, I can't say that. But yes, if you say that, it brings it out into the open. Now, you may not be a counsellor, but it's a friend who's in need, and you can see some of the signs and you ask the question directly. Research has shown if people are asked that question, there is a relief that most people experience, because there's a possibility now to talk about it. So as I said, evidence shows that when you talk about it, it brings it out into the open. But what I would say, if they say yes, I would say, by all the strength you have, resist the urge to fix or find solutions. That is what is not necessary at that particular time. It's unnecessary. Don't find solutions. Don't give opinions or advice, but just listen and encourage them to talk. Because what has happened, they've had stuff inside of them for maybe weeks and months, even longer, and now you're giving them the space finally somebody is going to take the time out to listen to me. And some of the stuff you hear may be hard, and I'll say a little bit in the end about how it's very important that we look after ourselves and so forth. So, and also as they tell their story, it might be the first time for a long time they're hearing their story outside of themselves. How many times, even you that are listening, how many times have you had something bottled up, and when you've been able to talk about it, the sheer relief, especially if you're in an environment where you're not being condemned or judged or anybody pointing the finger at you or condemning you, the relief that you feel, that's just maybe a dispute between your children or your partner or your spouse or a work colleague, let alone harboring something that you might have had for weeks and months, and it's really kind of ground you down into the ground. So if you think someone is struggling, let them know that you care, and advice is not necessary. Be there, be present. Don't necessarily give advice or your opinion, but just be there. I recall a friend who was dying, and I remember going to visit the person in hospital many years ago now, and I remembered being with her, held her hand for maybe about an hour, and before I left she said, Delroy, it's really nice having someone's presence with you. What did I say? Nothing, but just being there is really important, and I'd really encourage you to think seriously about this whole thing about presence, just being there. Okay. So one of the things that you may want to say to them is, what have you done to help the situation? What help have you sought? And wait for an answer. And because by asking the questions, it's helping you to kind of get a picture of what this person may have been going through. Or alternatively, you can ask, how do you feel about, or now some people say, well, asking them about suicide is a bit too harsh. But you could actually say to them, what are your feelings about the future? But that in itself might take them down a different journey. You may get something, but when you have that clear questioning, there's no kind of dodging really. If you say to somebody, what's your feelings about the future, they may not say much. They may say something, but it's kind of vague. But when you ask the question about taking your own life, that's really clear, specific, and it enables them to kind of engage. So then how do you listen? That's really important. How do you listen? Well, as I said before, you don't give advice, you don't give opinions, just be there and ask open-ended questions. Open-ended questions encourages discussion. It encourages conversation. Closed questions are yes/no answers. So somebody may say something to you, and then an open question might be, would you like to say, please say more about that. Say a little bit more about that. Or, gosh, that must have been really painful. How did he manage that? So it kind of encourages the person to kind of begin to open up without you forcing them. It's really important. And so some of the things that you can do as you're listening to them, and then if things are kind of settling a little bit, some of the things that you can do for them, you can get in touch with the family or the friends, maybe get in contact with the GP or the mental health services, because one of the things that you want to do is to ensure that they're safe, because you can't be with them all the time. And I'll be talking about developing a support network in a few moments. So you can signpost the Samaritans, a mental health team, and if the moment subsides, and it often does, there's a safety plan I'll be looking at the moment, and one of the things they say, that those feelings of suicide will pass. They're not intense forever. They do subside, and it's staying with the person until it subsides, and then it's getting the help that they need. A safety plan is really important. You kind of contact the health professional and so forth. But the safety plan is something that's formulated by the Samaritans. It's really good. If you go onto their website, you'll see the safety plan, and I've taken some bits out of it, but it's really important. It's 2 pages. It takes between 20 to 40 minutes to complete, but what happens is this: If the person ever feels suicidal again and they are on their own, there is a way in which they're able to manage themselves and get the help that they need. So in a sense, prevention is better than cure. So this plan they need to have with them, because sometimes people go through some really difficult times, and the emotions, until they get a handle on it, the emotions can seem really overwhelming. Now imagine some of us that are listening today and in the future, we've had emotions, things have happened, and we've been really overwhelmed with what's taken place, and it's really kind of difficult to kind of engage with. But this whole thing about these feelings and these thoughts will subside is really important. So what can you do in those moments or that time when things are really, really difficult? So the safety plan is a tool developed by the Samaritans to help people with suicide ideation or suicide thoughts or suicide feeling. The plan begins by saying this: feeling suicidal is the result of extreme pain and not having the resources to cope. That's what it is. It's extreme pain and not having the resources to cope. You can imagine, it kind of makes sense, doesn't it? Extreme pain, and if we haven't got the resources, well, what do? We think that's it. I think I may not have mentioned, actually. I remember working with a young woman a few years ago who came to counsel with her mother and asked if her mother could come into the session. I said no, I've done that before. Fatal mistake. And I remembered talking to this young woman. She's about 19, 3 attempts on her life, and I think she'd made one not too long before she came to see, a day or so before she came to see me. So as I was talking, it very, very clear to me that she'd not got any coping mechanisms. So a young person, we learn how to cope in a crisis from our homes. So if you've got parents who sit down, rationally talk things through, look at strategies, that's what we learn. So it's very clear to me this woman had no coping strategies at all, just as I kind of listened to her. So I said to her, when you were growing up, I said, when your mum and dad had an argument, how was it resolved? So she said, you mean an argument about us children? I said, no, just a kind of family argument. How was it resolved? So she said, well, I can't remember how it goes now, but one would go in the front room, one would go in the conservatory. So I said, at what point would they come together to sort things out? She said, they never did. She said, I brought them together. Well, that was startling to hear. So I said to her, if you're bringing your parents together to sort out a problem, where have you learnt the skills to sort out problems? So I said to her, kind of rather tongue in cheek, and I said, now, could you imagine your mother being in here and hearing that? And she started laughing. And so, and as far as I know, she never did take her own life. She saw what was going on. One session, that's all it was. She never came back for any more. And while I was at where I was, never heard of anybody taking their own life. So it's really important as parents that we kind of handle things really, really well. But certainly, feeling suicidal is a result of extreme pain and not having the resources to cope. If we can understand, that's really important. And the plan is to reduce pain, can't eliminate it, reduce pain and increase coping resources. And there's a whole series of questions, and I've written some of them down just to kind of give us an insight. But as I said, go onto the Samaritan website and download it and just have it. Archive it, that if you know that you've got friends who may be struggling and you're not too sure at the moment of the suicidal, the struggling is been going on for quite some time, and you kind of sense that they're kind of going further and further down in a kind of dark hole. It's really important you have something close at hand. It's helpful for them, but also it's helpful for you. So a series of questions that you and the person have to answer. So one of the questions is, what do I need to do to reduce the risk of me acting on suicidal thoughts? So the person then writes it down. So what this sheet does, what the question does, when the person goes back to it, if they're feeling in a state, then what it does, it slows everything down. It distracts them from the thoughts. So 2 pages, loads of questions. Other questions, what have I done in the past that has helped? What ways of coping do I have? What will I do to help me feel calm and soothe myself? What can I tell myself as an alternative to the dark thoughts? These are questions that the person, you sit with your friend and the person writes them down. The whole process of writing them down is to think about what should happen again if nobody's around and I start feeling suicidal. Who can I call? Friend or relative or someone else? What health professional can I call when I'm in this state? What telephone helplines can I have to call when I'm kind of really filled up with all these suicidal thoughts? And where can I go that's safe? And you're thinking, well, Delroy, this is just a kind of list. And if people are really feeling so distraught, will it help? It really will do. It's a safety net. It's a safety plan that they can go to when they're feeling overwhelmed with some very painful emotions. As I was putting this together, my mind went back to somebody I was working with many years ago as a student. He made a decision and he didn't want to continue, but then he'd signed an agreement with the landlord and loads of stuff, and owed the landlord. The landlord was looking for his money, and his parents were poor, didn't have much money, and when I called, he was in a state. He was crying his eyes out and I couldn't get a word in edgewise, and this went on for quite some time and there was no consoling him whatsoever. There was no consoling him. And I said to him, I can't remember his name and his name's immaterial. I said to him, let me ask you. I said, is there a writing pad and pen in your room? He said, yeah. I said, go and get it. So he went and got it. He says, well, what do you want to do with it? So I said, so there's a thing called 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Five things you can see, 4 things you can hear, 3 things you can smell. There's a whole kind of range of them. But it's an exercise for people who are suffering with anxiety. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. You're using your senses. It's sight, hearing, smell, sound, and the last one is taste. So I walked him through this. I said, name five things in the room that you can that you can see. So he wrote them down. By the time we got to things you can hear, I said to him, what's happening to you? He says, I'm not feeling as emotional. It really brought him down. It really slowed him down. And at the end of that exercise, which took less than 5 minutes, we were able to have a rational conversation about some of the things that he could do. But before that, it was in a right state. So this safety plan is really important, that when the person may be on their own and they're overwhelmed with all these emotions, there's something that they can look to and they can get the help and support that they need, and also to bring them down, knowing that the intensity of the pain will pass. There are many people today alive who at one time were suicidal, but they were able to get through it, good support. And I've always said, even before I started counselling, I've always said, and no matter what we go through, all we need is 2 or 3 people that can be with us during our crisis, and it can be really helpful. So I want to kind of encourage us, even though you may not be a counsellor, but you can have the skills, and certainly listen to some of the stuff on this, some of the hints and tips on this live broadcast, and making a note of them, going onto the various websites and getting some information can really equip you to support a friend who's feeling suicidal. So the person needs the plan close at hand, either put it on the phone. Well, gosh, nowadays, who walks around with paper and a notepad? Only somebody born in the 50s. But younger people, you have it on the phone so they can go directly to it when they're in a great need. The other thing that was really important is to create a support network, to put something in place. Now, you might have a friend who is feeling suicidal, and believe you me, it's hard work. I'm going to say a little bit about that in a bit. But there might be a group of you, so you do need to have some contact with health professionals. That's really important, safeguarding yourself and also the person. But having a support network, that it could be that a group of you decide that each day you're going to be in contact with your friend to ensure that they're okay. And that's really important. And it could be a text, it could be a voice note, it could be a WhatsApp message, it could be calling them. Somebody call them in the morning, somebody call them in the afternoon. And you keep that up until the person is out of, they're getting the support, but they're out of the worst. That's really important. I recall somebody who brought to the counselling service many years ago. Something had happened, a bit kind of terrific accident she'd had, and she was so distraught. And she went into the kitchen, and her friend followed her into the kitchen, and she picked up a kitchen knife, and she was going to stab herself with it. So what her friend did, she stayed with her in the room in the kitchen, and she called the ambulance. Anyway, whatever happened, she got down to A&E, and she was given the support. So actually staying with individuals and having a support network, so that during the critical stage the person is not left on their own, and they can find their way through the difficult time. And you can do this without offering any advice or opinion or trying to fix them. As I said before, right at the beginning, resist the urge to fix, but just listen, and don't underestimate the power of listening. If you listen well, that in itself is therapeutic. So we think sometimes we have to do stuff, when things are really kind of overwhelmed, and we think we kind of, we need to jump into action and all the rest of it. But no, listening itself can be really therapeutic. Let me just check. I've seen a couple of messages. I just want to check that I'm not missing anything. No, that's fine. Brilliant. Okay, let me just check further down. Okay, right, brilliant. Okay, I don't know what's. Okay, so so you listen well, you ask them direct questions, be there, be present. If it means turning off your phone, you're present, be with them, let them know that you care. And sometimes you don't even need to let people know that you care, but your presence lets them know that you care. And think about creating a safety plan, also providing or creating a support network. And one of the things I'd also say, reach out to the professionals, Samaritans, GP, the NHS 111, and special services. Again, all of that is on the Samaritans network, and there's lots of other networks which I can actually share later on. The final thing I want to say about supporting a friend who is feeling suicidal is looking after yourself. Let me tell you, even as a counsellor, working with somebody who's suicidal, it is no joke when you walk into the room and somebody says, I was at the hospital last night, so I tried to take my own life. There's no joke on that. And I've heard that many times in my work as a counsellor, and you think to yourself, right, okay, this is serious business. But one of the things that you need to do is to ensure that you're not alarmed or frightened by what they say, because if they sense that you're frightened or alarmed, that will spook them, and that will not cause them to kind of relax or be stable. So looking after yourself is really important, and supporting a friend struggling with suicidal thoughts is absolutely demanding work. It's demanding work if you're a counsellor, and it's certainly demanding if you're not a counsellor. It can leave you exhausted and tired. It really can. The amount of energy that you expend in being anxious and just wanting to support the individual is quite it's quite a lot. You yourself need rest and support, and maybe you need to speak to somebody just to kind of talk it through, because actually sometimes if people start to talk of some of the things that they went through or they've gone through, some of the stories alone is traumatic, and you're hearing that being traumatic and vicarious trauma, you're hearing that as well, and that can have an effect on you as well as you listen to their story as well, you're being present. So one of the things that you can do, one of the things that you might think this is actually quite difficult, but one of the things you may do is actually say to a friend, look, you're in the hands of professionals now, and I'm not going to be able to give you the support that you need. And sometimes, again, as a counsellor, I've had to say that to people. I've had to make the referral. Either I'm fully booked up, or I haven't got the space and so forth. But so you have to be strong enough to say, look, things were kind of quite difficult, and it might be that I won't be around for a little while, and I won't be contactable for quite some time or for a little while. It's just letting the person know. It's not that you're not abandoning them, but you need some time for yourself. So self-care is really important. Make sure you get the rest, and make sure you get the support that you need. Find somebody you can talk to debrief. Certainly, I say that for people who are working with individuals in crisis, mental health workers, they need people who they can talk to just to kind of debrief and to shed some of the trauma that they may be carrying from listening to the story or witnessing some difficult scenes. So check in with the person by agreement, and you can do this as a support group. 4 or 5 of you, sometimes not even that many, 2 or 3 who are constant, supporting, not a form of dependency, but just checking in with the person. You don't need to spend long. How you doing? How's things? And so it's more supportive, not advice nor opinions, not trying to fix things, but it's really kind of support. And so what you do, if by checking in, you're letting people know that you care, you're still there for them, you're present, but also they're not a burden. Because one of the things when people feeling suicidal, they feel, in fact, one of the reasons why they get to the place where they're feeling suicidal is because that they feel a burden. Remember last week I said that one of the things that some people say when they feel suicidal, that my family would be better off without me. That means that they're feeling a bit like a burden. So by checking in with them regular, it's letting them know they're not forgotten, they're not a burden, you care about them, and you really want to know that they're kind of making progress. And one of the things I would say is to end, don't force someone to open if they don't want to or they're not ready to. But believe you me, do not, if you don't remember anything else from this session this evening, do not underestimate the power of your presence, just being there, sitting with them. Maybe if they want a glass of water or they want a cup of tea, just making that drink and bringing it to them, and not maybe say much, but you sit with them for an hour and a half. You're just there with them, because what it is then, what they'll be experiencing, they're not on their own with these horrendous emotions. Somebody is with them. So don't underestimate the power of your presence. Okay, finished. Next week, all being well, we'll be looking at how to support a family. So we've looked at the signs and symptoms. Today we looked at supporting somebody who feels suicidal. So next week we'll be looking at how do we support a family or friend who's lost a loved one through suicide. I'll see you again next week at 7, and hopefully we can get these things. I guess we'll get everything sorted out by the last one the last session in 2 weeks' time. Thank you very much indeed for your time, and wish you well. Speak to you soon. Take care now. Bye bye.